like to thank Mr. Betterton for sharing his readers with me so I can manage through this meeting. So we will probably have to skip around here because we have, Talia has a commitment and Mr. Squibb has a commitment?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll be pushing. Okay, so you help me, Mr. Betterton. But I do need to read the ethics statement, conflict of interest reminder for NCGS 138A-15E. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest or the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any of the matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. So please review your agenda and I'll entertain a motion to accept tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. So we have no public comment sign up. So we'll move to Talia. Do you want to give your report right now?
Sure.
Okay.
From right here. Okay, so as you guys know, I was not at the last meeting, but Naeem did tell me that he discussed the power puff and how successful it was and how much we raised. Over the break, we did give out the rest of the food to the families. And now, mainly what we've been talking about during the meetings is homecoming. So homecoming is set next Friday, February 7th. We will have a game, and then following the game, we will have the homecoming dance, following the boys' game, which will last for about probably from 9 to 11, just around that time. We have hired, parent has hired a DJ for us, so I don't know if school has been, but that has hyped up attendance-wise, so a lot of people are planning on attending, which is paying a lot of funds as well, so that's really good. Everything's been successful as far as what we've been talking about. After we discuss and get all the homecoming stuff situated, we don't have to spend any money this year. We're going to use the same decorations. Some parents have volunteered as well, some decorations that they've used at other winter dances. And that will definitely help out because we can make it as beautiful as we can without making it beautiful but not spending too much money as well. Very good. And then after we do homecoming, we will start planning our spring community service project, which we plan on doing in March. And we're deciding between a volleyball game, so similar to the Powder Puff game, but a volleyball game, or, and I think they were trying to paint tiles, which has been successful for other schools. And that, I believe it's going towards some, I'm pretty sure, I think it's a disability charity or something like that, in that line. We still have to do our research on it, but we haven't completely talked about it. It's just me and Naeem have discussed some ideas to bring to the board. And that's pretty much as far as events-wise going on. I did hand out a sheet with our schedule on it. Last time, Naeem addressed a meeting schedule. Ms. Dixon, you did say that you wanted to come to one of the meetings. Next week, we're not having a meeting because of the homecoming pep rally and all that, but 21st, every fourth Friday, everyone comes to the meetings, and every second Friday is just the executive members. So if you want to come where more people are there, all the homeroom reps and all of that, that would be the fourth Fridays, which will give you the schedule through the rest of the year.
Okay.
That's mainly it.
I'll plan on the 21st.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Good luck with the game.
Thank you.
If we could quickly approve the minutes and let Mr. Swift go. So hopefully you've reviewed the minutes from the last meeting. We've had some special meetings, so this was a special meeting, and I don't think we've had the minutes yet from the January special meeting.
I just sent Nicole an update. Michelle was listed as both absent and present.
Yeah.
She was moved, but she'll
I
correct
think I
it.
was different.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
No, not as presented, but
Oh,
clarification.
as with corrections.
Right.
Okay. So a motion to accept the minutes as corrected, a second, and no questions, all in favor, aye, opposed? Okay, so the minutes have been accepted, thank you. Mr. Squibb, good to see you, Happy New Year. Please proceed.
I'm going to reference a lot of what I discussed to a portion that's in your packet, News Charter School Exceptional Children's Program. Here at News Charter School, we provide special education and related services to our students, and those ages range from 4 to 22 years old. Eligibility is based on a certain criteria for each individual disability category, but there's also other factors that come in place, like students' present level of performance, work samples, and I'll go through some of that tonight. Essentially, our philosophy of our program is all students can learn, each student is an individual, and all students have the right to an appropriate educational experience. If you look on the top of page 2, I'm not going to go through each one of these eligibility categories, but there are 14. It's important to note that even if a child has a disability, such as if we have a student that is on the spectrum of autism, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're qualified for special education services. There's a criteria, as we spoke about, for eligibility, but the disability must also have an adverse effect on the student's educational performance, which requires specially designed instruction. I've included at the bottom of page 2 a breakdown of our students here at News Charter School and their eligibility. So essentially we have 17 students on the autism spectrum, 2 developmentally delayed, and from there. It's important to note, and I've listed this below the chart here, that a student can be found eligible in one category, but also have a secondary category as speech, language impairment, or occupational therapy.
Is LD learning, is just generic learning disability?
Yes, so if you look on number 11, specific learning disability, it's broken down into 2 categories. So on our chart, we have IDMI, which is ID mild, and also IDMO, which is ID moderate. We essentially offer 3 programs of support here at News Charter School. I'm going to discuss each one of those programs, but I'm also going to talk about a unique element that we've added for our students here at News Charter School. One, the inclusion support, which is probably more relevant to most of our students here at News Charter School. This support is when students receive special education within the general education classroom. So essentially this classroom will have a gen ed teacher and a special education teacher, and the philosophy that we're trying to build here is the special ed students aren't just working with the special ed teacher. It's a collaborative effort to present instruction to students and so forth. Our occupational course of study it's new to us. This is our 2nd year of this for us at News Charter School. It's a state mandated course of study. It's for our students that are more hands-on, more of a work and career path rather than a college pathway. Students do graduate with a diploma. This year we've there's 3 components to this. There's a school-based portion where students receive hours here at News. There's a work-based portion, a community-based portion, which our 10th graders are currently in, which is supported through JCI. And the 3rd component will not be JCI. We're transitioning our students from JCI to vocational rehabilitation, And Voc Rehab will take on all evaluations for our students in the program. They'll set up job placements for our students, and that's essentially at no cost for us. And finally, the last support system that we offer is our Max Resource Classroom. This is to support more of our students with higher needs. Students have more modifications, more of a need for specifically designed instruction in these Max Resource classes. Before I talk about our speech club, I've listed, if you look on the top of, or I'm sorry, on the bottom of page 4, a breakdown of our students' percentage of time in special education. And this is ultimately what you ideally would like to see. Our students, 79 of our students are receiving support in the inclusion setting. So less than 20% of their day is away from their non-disabled peers. 16 of our students are receiving essentially more of the max resource support, and none of our students here are removed from their non-disabled peers for the entire school day. And that's ultimately what we're shooting for and what we're going for. A unique element that we've added this year, a lot of times what we've noticed and what a lot of districts in the state have noticed is a lot of our kindergartners and a lot of our first graders come to us, or just in general, have some type of speech delay that may not necessarily require them for, or allow them to receive evaluations or certify them or qualify them for speech support. Through the help of working directly with Ms. Brogdon, we have created a speech club, and it's for those students that might have 1 or 2 speech errors that have been noticed or observed in the early parts of kindergarten, or if they're new to us in first grade. The speech club meets once a week. They come together as more of a team approach, and Ms. Brogdon works on those sound errors. And we've had 8 students essentially either graduated or almost graduate from speech club, and they've not had to receive the direct support from an IEP, which has been really productive. The problem we were finding is if they weren't eligible for speech support, they didn't receive any support. So this way we're able to provide them support if their need wasn't necessary to require them for the support from speech language therapy. This is our first year for the state of implementation of ECATS. It's just the new DPI mandate system that every LEA will use. We were the first district, and I know we're not as big as some of the other districts, but even including charter schools, that fully implemented ECATS. ECATS tracks all of your IEP paperwork, it tracks all of your accountability, all of your compliance components. And not only were we the first to implement, we're also the first based on our head count, which was recently submitted to be 100% compliant in ECATS. So that's... Are there any specific questions? I certainly don't mind them.
So you mentioned about, I remember the discussion about JCI to help with the other one, the vocational rehabilitation. Who's actually the provider of that?
There's a voc rehab through Johnston County.
Oh, okay.
And they come out and we're working in they collaborate with JCI. So essentially it's a smooth transition. Students essentially work with JCI through the community support. They'll receive their evaluations from voc rehab, and then voc rehab will take our students and take them out into the community for work support. And
That's a state program administered on local level, by county level, right?
as far as the OCS,
Vocational rehab?
it's not, we had to go search out for it, but it is a state program.
Okay.
It's not readily available, but we were fortunate to turn over some stones and find it.
So is there anything that we need to approve? I mean, I remember we had to, vote to approve the JCI one.
Does that contract include the voc rehab?
It does. It's a separate contract, JCI and voc rehab. It's a discussion that them and I will have probably within the next month. We've actually already started the evaluations for all of our 10th graders that are in the community-based portion of it. that didn't require any approval. It was just having a psychologist come in and work with our students to get those updated evaluations.
So looking forward, Mr. Squibb, what would you like to see happen to EC? How do you imagine it evolving, if at all?
Yes, ma'am. I think the ideal scenario for special education, especially here at News Charter School, is an inclusion system where we have a co-teacher, an EC teacher, and a general ed teacher working collaboratively for our students in a classroom. That does a couple of things, but mainly I've got to get the models in place so we properly support that system and properly support our EC teachers and gen ed teachers too. I think the problem that not just us, but everybody has is what should inclusion support look like? And what it shouldn't be is the special ed teacher with the special ed students and the gen ed teacher working solely with the gen ed students. So it's something we've started, and it's something we've identified as being a very important element for us, and that's what we're going to continue to work towards.
And would that involve policy changes?
No specific policy changes. I've kind of tentatively created a 3-year plan for professional development on what support our teachers need, and we've already started that process. We've submitted a team grant, which comes to us in the form of an autism grant, and we're able to use that for professional development. So we've already had not just our EC teachers, but some of those co-teaching pairs off campus to institutes and where they're talking and working with professionals, peers, whatever, on what that proper inclusion support should look like.
So I think one point was you just hit on it. Thanks for doing that. It's about, depending on the numbers of students you have in an inclusion environment. I think there was some ambiguity or confusion by people does an inclusion mean that every single time a student that needs particular services and they're in a general classroom, that it's required that a special, education staff member being there every day at all times with all students. So
Yes, sir.
I mean, that you can't do that
No.
at that scale. That's impossible. So as we look forward, I think some clarity to people about what that real expectation is so that everybody's on the same page.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
guys.
think that especially the graphs and some of the statistics, and Jane and I know from talking to someone who asked us a bunch of questions, if we didn't readily have the numbers. So I think this is very helpful to give us a snapshot of where we are, and I think a presentation, a readout every year of what our numbers look like, and then maybe even like a 3-year trend, things going up or things going down or whatever would also kind of help put things in perspective. So I appreciate the
Yes,
work,
ma'am.
very well done.
And just the last number I want to give you guys, we just recently submitted head count, and we're at 93 students total here at News Charter School
Right.
that have an ID.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
work on
guys.
this.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicely done. Oh, yes, Ms. Browning. So was the receipt for Champion under your director? Okay, and your report, okay.
We're looking at athletic eligibility here at News, and we're going to kind of frame up some of the eligibility requirements and to understand that we do want to expect high expectations here at News.
So one of the things that we looked at when we looked at how our current student eligibility is worded, there was a lot of things that were repetitive and some things that were left out. So one of the things that we looked at was kind of cleaning up the language and making it a little bit more concise. For number 1, under the middle school, one of the changes it says compared to our existing policy is the existing policy says maintain a C or better in every core class with no failing grades. This one has it so that it would be a C average in their core classes with no failing grades. from the previous semester as indicated in the Power School generated on the report card. There are then questions of when does it go into place and how are they notified. It also didn't specify in ours that the student at the middle school level had to be academically promoted. So that's cleaned up and put in there. It also lays it out very similar to the county policy, where the county policy is identifying that a 5th grader who is promoted to 6th grade with a C average in their core classes and no failing grades is automatically eligible the first semester. Looking down from there, one of the things that was missing in our existing policy was addressing attendance. Being a school that's focusing on academics, we felt like we needed to have the attendance piece in there that had been missing. So we addressed the fact that we, going along with the suggestions of the state and other policies that we've looked at, that the student must not be absent from school more than 8 days in the previous semester. And that gives us, in there's an addendum or a way that if a student's out on a medical issue or if there is extenuating circumstances, that the principal at each level has the ability to look into waiving it if there's an issue with why the absences were. It also cleans it up when it comes to homeschooling. The biggest thing that we're hearing a lot at the state meetings is homeschoolers are going to try to participate at different schools, and what kind of parameters are you going to have to make sure that they're meeting the academic criteria and not just coming and trying to play a sport since they're homeschooled. So this just gives us specification in here that their grades will be evaluated by the principal to determine their eligibility. Number 6 talks about grades and attendance will be evaluated on a quarterly basis. This was in place on the high school policy the way it was written. However, it didn't specify in the middle school policy that they would be evaluated on a quarterly basis to maintain eligibility. I think it was just an oversight that it wasn't put in there, but when I'm being in a position of enforcing it, it wasn't written. So this kind of cleans up some of the lack of wording that we had. And then it also talks about number 7 with the exceptional students showing satisfactory progress in their curriculum, and then meeting the C average and attendance requirement. At the high school level, one of the things that Mr. Betterton and I discussed was, wanting to keep the emphasis on the core classes. However, when I took that theory and tried to apply it to high school kids and looking at their grades, I would have students that maybe had 1 core class and 2 electives and work study or something for 1 semester. So I couldn't say that all of those students had passed 3 out of 4 core classes because they didn't have just the way their semester landed. There was some differences in when core classes were offered and that kind of thing. So what they did, or what we talked about, was for the student athlete must maintain a weighted GPA of 2.25 or higher for the previous semester. It also, just like the state policy states, that an 8th grader promoted to the 9th grade will be eligible to play the first semester. And then it covers, number 3 is just the 4 through 6, or 4 through 7 above, ensuring that we have the attendance policy, ensuring that they're maintaining their academic grades by us checking them on a quarterly basis. Yes.
So just to be clear, and I know you read the previous policy from middle school, but number 1 on both middle school and high school, have we gone stricter, less strict? Because the way that I read number 1 for middle school, for example, is a C average, which means they could have 2 Ds and 2 Cs and have a C average, right?
One of the complaints that we were getting from the fact that a high school student was able to have, with a 2.0 GPA, they could have a D, because the way the high school one was written, it says a 2.0 GPA with no failing grade. Well then, that high school student could have a D in math, and they were still eligible to play the way our current policy was written.
Right.
So the high school one has gotten stricter by adding the 2.25. However, the middle school one looks as though it's gotten a little weaker, but as I went back and kind of plugged in like all kinds of different classes and weighing them and looking at it, the high school one isn't any weaker than the middle school one, is not any weaker than what the high school one is. So this brings them both to be the same standard. There was a significant difference before. Middle school was held to a lot higher standard.
So the middle school standard has gone down and the high school standard has basically stayed the same, because a 2.25 weighted GPA still means you could have a D.
Correct.
Okay. Just making sure that we all understand that what we've really done is lowered our expectations, not raised them for grades, right?
For middle school?
For middle school, well, and I mean, we haven't raised them for high school and we've lowered them for middle school because middle school was stricter. So that's why I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
because the way that it's being presented sounds like it's stricter, and it doesn't seem like that.
You said high school changed from a 2.0 to a 2.25, so that has gotten stricter.
High school has gotten stricter.
Was it a 2.0 weighted?
It was weighted.
Is that what it said in the policy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's the part I didn't hear. Okay, so that got stricter, but you could still have a D and get a 2.25 weighted.
If you had A's in the other classes and D there, it's possible.
Well, you can have 2 Ds and two Cs in middle school and get a 1.5, which is around up to a 2. If you round. So that's not, I mean,
Is it possible to become ineligible in the middle of the season?
Yes.
Where would that?
That's a quarter review.
To maintain eligibility.
Okay.
What
So for those sports that would overlap a quarter, such as basketball, you could become ineligible or eligible in the middle of a season.
No, not-
So you can't become eligible?
You can't become eligible during the season.
Okay.
So I have a question about number 6, in middle school. So you noted that this was in place, but the quarter wasn't made. So what's been the practice to date? Have y'all been pretty much staying on a quarterly basis?
I look at them on a quarterly basis, and I communicate with the coaches about like where they are in their grades. We have study hall before for middle school basketball boys this year. Last year it was flipped and it was for the middle school girls before practice. Because the policy hasn't stated that they were removed at a quarter check, middle school has not been.
Okay.
We work with the parents, we talk about, hey, we've identified the fact that their grades are not meeting. However, I haven't been able to point right here because they're saying, why would you remove them? Because it's based on semester, because it doesn't state quarterly.
So are there some procedures that go with this to say, I mean, one, is there some kind of appeal process if they lose eligibility? Is there a form that's standardized so everybody, you collect the same information from every student on a quarterly basis to determine their eligibility? Is there anything, because other than that, then it feels a little subjective, that it's just, you kind of, I mean, is there something that someone can say, tell me what exactly you're looking at when you determine whether my kid is eligible or not?
I look right in Power School and I go line by line and I just reference the school policy. There's not a form that I fill out on each kid when I do the grade check. I evaluate, I look at the grades that are in Power School, see that the store report card grades that are in Power School, see whether they're eligible or ineligible. If I see that they're ineligible, I typically will go to Ms. Nowinski to double check me, or Mr. Williams, who's been able to access and help me double check to verify it. If they're ineligible, then I highlight it. Once I complete that for the entire roster, I send an email to, if I have a student who becomes ineligible, I send an email to, if it's a high school student, I include the student, the parent, the coach, and typically the administrator for that level, and notify them that the student is not academically eligible, that they need to turn in their uniform and that kind of thing. When I've completed it for the whole team, I sign that I as a D have checked it. I have the coach verify that roster that I checked, that they didn't accidentally leave a name off of the roster. Like someone had been practicing that we didn't know about, or that kind of thing. So the coach verifies that as the roster. They have on the roster who is no longer eligible again, and I have them sign it.
So what I'm saying, is that somewhere that a parent would say, this is the process? I could read, this is the process. This is procedures that you go to determine that my kid is not eligible anymore? Or I mean, I think that would be helpful, because other than that, if they asked me, I would have no idea. If they, I can't point to it anywhere and say, this is what the athletic director does to determine eligibility. And they would know that from the beginning. They know where they get the grades. It's looking at grades versus talking to the teacher, but that's nowhere, outlined where everyone would actually know what the procedure is for checking the grades.
If you notice at number 1, it says semester grades as indicated by Power School. So that's where we get our information from Power School.
Well, let me tell you, the emails I get, it would be half of the time, it would be very helpful if I could point to something and it's not just in your head for the procedure, that you can point to a parent and say, this is what they have actually did. Okay, I guess I'm not going to argue it. I thought they talked to the whatever they come up. Because we've had some parents, argue about eligibility and this, that, and the other, and I don't have anything to say other than Power School. Well, who checked Power School? Does it say the athletic director?
And
I mean, just procedures are helpful to eliminate confusion.
And I think it's slightly confusing about semester versus quarterly, right? So in number 1, it says they can't have a failing grade the previous semester. In number 6, it says they'll be evaluated quarterly. So are we evaluating
To maintain eligibility.
to maintain eligibility, right? But what I'm saying
The semester
is,
has to set the eligibility.
right, the semester sets the eligibility, the quarter sets,
You can lose it.
right, you can lose it, exactly. But I think what I'm saying is, I'm agreeing with Dawn that I think if we knew for sure what the procedure was every quarter, because I think the first one is pretty clear, right? That at the semester, if you look back at your grades from the previous semester, you know whether you're eligible or not. But what happens midway through is the part that I think isn't quite as clear, right? That quarterly.
Like when in the
quarterly.
It could be, I got a big test next week and that's going to change my grades, but you decided to do it.
So where it says evaluated quarterly to maintain athletic eligibility as based on the school calendar?
Oh, I don't know when you do, I mean, you can determine when, I just think
At the end
it
of the
would
9
be.
weeks grading period?
9 weeks training period?
Yeah.
It's more along the lines of some operating procedures, because I would imagine that this could be open to being grieved by a student on the school side. And if your operations are spelled out and you're looking at it the same day of the month and doing it all the same, it's not a lot to add.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would do is, on these items 4 through 7, I would try to make sure that that these apply to everybody, and just a little bit of change in the way that's presented. Because you get back down here and you say under high school that, now go back to middle school and
So
see.
you want to list it again?
No, what you could always do is say, following items apply to all students. The following apply to middle school. Or whatever works. But my point is, don't make somebody have to go back and it winds up getting cut off the bottom of a copy or something.
Okay.
Just, I'm persnickety, sorry.
So rather than repeating and repeating and repeating, like we talked about the other night.
Yeah, just,
Yep, and then delineate the ones
right.
between it. So this applies to everyone, and then the ones that are specific to middle school and high school are kind of at the bottom or something.
Right.
So it's easier to pull that out.
Okay.
And can I ask one more question, sorry, about the grade averages? So, like do you round up when you're talking like a C average? Like, does it have to come out to be a 2? Or if they have a 1.5 average, does it round up to a 2?
No,
Or
1.5 does not round up to
okay,
2.
does a one, I'm just wondering again, because depending on how you do your math and where you round, right, you're going to have parents who are going to ask, well, you said it's the average. So I'm just wondering if that's something else that we should have an example, or
The math is done by a Power School. Is that correct?
For
Not
high
for
school it
middle
is, but not for middle school. For middle school, if it's an A, we just do A equals 4 points. It doesn't matter if it's a 97A or a 91A, an A is 4. And it's hand tallied that way.
right. So if you end up with like a 1.75 or
It's a 1.75.
and so it literally has to reach to a 2.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I think that potentially I don't know what kind of language you might want to put in there, but you might want to express that it won't be rounded, because you're going to have parents push you. Johnny got a blah, 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 and I want to, normally you would round on that.
Okay, good points.
So just a couple of things, and this is just clarification for me. And as I read it, like just Jane was saying, literally versus interpretation. So in number one, a student must have a C average. I'm assuming that means a minimum of a C average, right? I mean, if you read it explicitly, it says they have to have a C average, and that's not correct.
Right.
So just you want to make sure it says a minimum of a C average. And also it says with no failing grade the previous semester as indicated by prior school. Is that no failing grade in just a core class or any class?
No failing grade in any class.
Okay, so I would explicitly say that then. Same thing in number 3. If a 5th grader is promoted to the 6th grade with a minimum of a C average, just so that it's the same. In number 5, we should be consistent in terminology, not the principal, the academy leader, just from a semantics perspective. And then in number 2 in high school, we changed this from previous with number 3 in middle school, a 5th grader moving up. What's the logistics of an 8th grader gets a bye if they've been with us and they go to 9th grade? That they could have totally flunked all their classes in 8th grade, or they would have been eligible. Or is the fact that if they failed in, I mean, just because they were promoted to 9th grade doesn't mean they had a C average as a middle schooler.
That's true. The state just words, I know in the state policy it says an 8th grader, a 9th grader is automatically eligible at the state level. So possibly looking at putting the same parameters on them that we have for the 5th grade and for number 3.
Yeah.
So.
Changes and bring it back to vote.
Yeah, were you looking for a vote now, or this was a lot of changes? Can we table?
Okay, oh, yeah.
Okay, and you can resubmit the,
Right,
okay.
no problem.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, sure. So we are going to, did you have anything else?
Well, I do, but go ahead. You
Yeah,
got this.
yeah, so we have a special guest presenter, and we will let him go first, and that's a finance committee.
So just to give context to everybody, Reason Associates does our audit. They've been doing it, what, about 3 years now, I think it was, Jay? Is it 4th year? And so one of the things is, I just thought it would be good to kind of get on a cadence where he comes and kind of gives us an outside-in perspective about the audit, what he saw, what he observed. They do a lot of other, schools and school districts, so it's just good an outside-in view. He's going to cover a little bit of the process and then kind of give a financial status of what he saw in the audit.
Presentation. As Rodney said, my name is Jay Sharp. I'm the audit partner that oversees the school's annual audit. The school, along with every charter school in the state, is required to have an annual audit by general statute. Because you're receiving government funding, it's really a two-part audit. It's a financial audit and it's a compliance audit, or what they call a single audit. So the first part of my presentation is going to talk about the audit proceedings, and the second part is going to concentrate on the numbers. We'll go ahead and get started. The status of the audit, field work has been completed. The financial statements have been prepared. The school was shown a draft and approved that. and the audit was submitted to the local government commission for their approval, and the local government commission did approve the audit. For background on that, the local government commission has to approve all government audits, whether it's a charter school, a city, or a school board. They approve all the contracts, all the invoices, and all the audits for these government entities. So the roles and objectives of the auditor, we don't just come in and start looking at the numbers. There's some planning procedures we do ahead of time. And the reason we do that is we gain an understanding of key internal controls in place, and we will test some of those controls. For this year, we tested controls over cash disbursements and over payroll. And from our understanding of the key internal controls and the results of the tested controls, we perform what you call a risk assessment. So it's a risk-based audit approach. So we're going to take all the major financial reporting pieces of the school, whether it be cash, revenues, expenses, and we're going to assess risks to each section based on everything we've understood. And we're going to key our audit procedures on higher risk areas. Now, we're going to look at all areas, but we're going to key audit procedures more on the higher risk areas because they're higher risk. And those higher risk areas can change year in and year out depending on our understanding of controls in place and the results of testing controls. We perform the audit procedures to obtain reasonable and sufficient evidence to render an opinion on the financial statements. That's the reason you hire us, is to give an opinion. And we're going to talk about that opinion in a second. But without that opinion, people will probably not have much confidence on the financial statements themselves because there's some assurance with that opinion that financial statements are materially correct. Like I said, that opinion concentrates on whether the financial statements are materially correct. That's a reasonable assurance, not absolute. No auditor is ever going to give absolute because they would have to test every transaction. Nobody wants that because that would cost a lot of money for us to test every transaction and take a long time. So it's a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So the results of this year's audit, scope and timing of the audit were slightly off track. I'm going to talk about that on the next page. I'm happy to report that we did issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements for 2019. That's the best possible opinion you can receive and should be the opinion that the school strives for year in and year out. There were no findings, and findings related to any financial reporting matters or compliance matters, and so there were no findings on either of those. And there are no management letter points. And so, if there's a material weakness or significant deficiency, we're required to have a finding. And like I said, there were no findings. But if there are other operational matters we think can be approved upon, we would issue a separate letter called a management letter. But everything we looked at seemed to be working correctly, and so there was no management letter points for the 2019 audit. There were no adjusting journal entries. And as auditors, we like to find a few of those, but there were no adjusting journal entries. I know you do contract out with Acadia to perform some of your accounting services. We work with them a great deal on some other audits, and they do a great job. It makes our job better so we can keep our fees down. And obviously, it helps y'all because you're making financial decisions. And if I came in here and said, hey, we had 30 adjusting journal entries, you may have some concern the information you're receiving is incorrect. But like I said, there's no adjusting journal entries, so you can have confidence the information you're receiving is correct so you can make the correct decisions for the school. Along with the audit, we issue what you call a communications letter. So basically, this details 4 key points. The first one has to do with significant accounting policy changes. If there's any major changes that would affect the notes of the financial statements, we're required to communicate those to you, and there were none this year. One of the areas we look at in great detail in our audit procedures are estimates. There are some numbers that are hard and fast numbers, and there are some numbers that are estimates. And so we do pay attention to the estimates. All the estimates this year appear reasonable, no issues there. I'm happy to report we had no disagreements with anybody during the audit proceedings, no issues at all with staff. Everybody cooperated 100%. Difficulties encountered. As I said, the audit was slightly off track for timing, and that was because we did get the audit signed and approved by LGC late in the process. Usually we like to have that audit contract in the June or July timeframe. We did not receive it until October, and so it kind of delayed starting the audit. We're not allowed to technically start the audit by general statute until we received that signed audit contract. So, it put us behind to start out with, but it was just a slight time delay, not a major one.
So just for a point of reference there, Jay, so I think it's important we get this set in stone because we've kind of dealt with this for 3 years. I think we need to have an official, I don't know whether it's going to be a policy for the board or whatever, that we need to have this voted and approved by, are you saying June typically?
So the LGC likes to have all the contracts in by June 30th. That's the date. They don't have a direct policy, but that's what they like to see.
So we need
I have
to,
a recommendation in that package. If you want to look at it.
okay, well, let's just take that as an item that we want to close on, that some of these things that we do every year, we need an official calendar, that we hold ourselves accountable that we get these things done in May for this one. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And we typically send out all our government contracts in the end of March, beginning of April, so it gives everybody plenty of time to get those signed. And so the rest of the presentation is going to deal with the numbers. And I've shown some comparative numbers just to show where you've come from. And so I think Rodney will agree it's been a long journey over the last 5 years, but you'll see a lot of improvements, drastic improvements with the financial condition of the school. So the first page is the revenues and expenses for the school for the last 5 years. You'll notice the first thing is back in 2016 and 15, the school showed a loss. Ever since then, they have shown a profit for those 3 years straight. Your revenues have increased each of the last 5 years, while your expenses have increased each of the 5 years. They have gone up at a less drastic pace than the revenues. And so you have been profitable each of the last 3 years after showing a net loss for 2 years in a row. Fund balance. Fund balance is a measurement of overall profitability of the school from day one of operations through a certain time period. So this graph starts at June 30th, 2014 and goes through June 30th, 2019. Back in 2014, you had $460,000 in fund balance. You'll notice you did have 2 years of operating losses, and so your fund balance actually was negative for 2015 and 2016. But as I said, you've had 3 straight years of profits, and your fund balance has rebounded to over $1.5 million at the end of June 30th, 2019. So heading in the right direction. The next couple, yes?
One point if I could there, because this was actually even confusing to me, is when we say the fund balance of 1.5 million, that's not net cash on hand as of that date, is it?
No, that is all your assets minus your liabilities. So that can include, most of it's cash, but some of it's receivables, prepaid expenses, minus any accounts payable you have.
I want to make sure people don't confuse that with cash on hand.
Sure. No, that's not all cash. The next few graphs are going to be some short-term liquidity risk ratios we calculate. The first one is really your cash reserves, or cash on hand. So what we're doing here is we're taking your cash balance at year end and comparing it to the prior year expenses. And what it calculates is how long can you continue operating if you receive no more cash inflows. For 2019, that ratio is 50 days. Compared to 51 in 2018. And obviously, back in 2017, 16, and 15, it was really low. But with your profits, your cash reserves have increased. Now, typically for a not-for-profit, we like to see this ratio in the 3 to 6 month range. So you're looking at somewhere 90 days to 180 days. That's what you consider a healthy reserve for not-for-profit. Like I said, you're below that for 2019 at 50 days. Like I said, you have increased and come a long way since your days in 2016 when you only had 1 day of operating cash flow.
Zero.
Yeah, zero pretty much. So you have rebounded, but something to consider when you're budgeting and moving forward in the future is getting that reserve balance in that 3 to 6 month ratio. The next short-term liquidity ratio is your working capital. So what we're looking at here is looking at your current assets versus your current liabilities. Obviously, at the very minimum, you want this to be 1-to-1. That means you have the exact current assets to pay off your current liabilities. But a healthy balance sheet is somewhere in a 3-to-1 ratio. So for 2019, it was actually 60-to-1. Because you've built up those cash reserves, and the school's done a really good job of having a low accounts payable balance at year end. Each of the last 5 years, the accounts payable has been very low. The reason the capital ratio is going up is because you have increased your cash reserves and make a more healthy balance sheet. And like I said, you continue to evaluate your payables and keep those at a minimum. And so that shows you have a very outstanding balance sheet at 2019. This is a really good working capital ratio. But as I said, if you take this with your cash reserves, one thing to look at is to continue looking at the cash reserves and trying to increase that until you get to that 3 to 6 month range. So the final 4 graphs are going to concentrate on the revenues and expenditures of the school. The first 2 are a revenue breakdown for 2019 versus 2018. First thing you'll notice is the pie graphs look very similar. Most charter schools we work with, they do look very similar year to year because your funding's going to be very similar. Majority of your funding, 74% in 2019, comes from state sources. Your second largest source is Johnson County, or all of other counties you get money from at almost 20%, followed by federal and other. For 2018, very similar, 73% of your revenues came from state sources, while the county made up 21% of that. So this is very common for all charter schools. Obviously, all charter schools are relying on state and county funding for the majority of its revenues. Some of them get more federal and some of them get less federal depending on the programs that they're in. And then there's always other. Now, some schools have done a lot better job of fundraising. We have a couple that have done an outstanding job of that. For the most part, most charter schools don't receive too much fundraising because they are getting the state appropriations. The final 2 graphs concentrate on your expenditure breakdown. And this is key because if...
So, Jay,
yes.
If I could, I just want to make a point for everybody. So as we think about this 4% number in the other category, one of the things that if we want to look at that deeper at some point is, I suspect that's just looking at the revenue on the budget line, right? Because, for example, I looked at the numbers at one point. So we take in like $70,000 in a year for fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, for field trip.
Yes.
And it's just pure pass-through.
Yes.
It's money we take in, from the parents, and we actually pay it right back out to the field trip. But that would show up in revenue.
That would be revenue, yes.
So that's not, we just need to remember that. That's not net cash that adds to the bottom line that becomes available for some of the other things we want to do. So we would have to break down that 4% and pass out, basically pull out that pass-through money.
Sure, absolutely. So the expenditure breakdown is very important. And, this is showing you how the school spends its money. And obviously, there are 2 main categories, instructional and support services. For 2019, 77% of your expenditures went to instruction. So basically, for every dollar you spent 77 cents of it to instructional. And that's an outstanding ratio. Typically, for not-for-profits, we like to see, and it's considered program spending, we like to see a program spending at about 66 to 75%. So you're above that. So you're doing an outstanding job of where you're spending your money toward instruction, instructing students. And that's important because, if you ever receive, people thinking about giving you grants in the future or, contributing to the school, one of the things they're going to look at is how you spend your money. Because if I came in here and said, hey, you spent 50% of your money in administrative expenses, people would think twice about giving to the school because you're not spending in the right direct place in instructional. And actually, you're probably one of the top categories of schools that we work with. Usually most charter schools average in the 66% range, so you're well above the average charter school we work with where you spend your money in the program. So that's an outstanding number, and it's just something that schools can really use for marketing purposes if it's trying to fundraise or get contributions. All right, I'll be glad to take any questions you may have on the audit process or the financial fee.
Just so I'm clear, Jay, the 22% on the support services, is that administrative, or what kind of falls into support services category?
Any administrative salaries, grant unfortunately falls into that, which, a regular not-for-profit would be able to divide its rent out between program and administrative, because obviously the majority of the school building you're using for instructing. But the way the chart of accounts is set up for charter schools, your rent is fully administrative costs.
Okay, in support services?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was doing a little bit of research to try to understand more nationally about the breakdown of whether it's, administrative support costs, facility costs, the cost of this school, so that we can compare with this. I don't have all the numbers for that yet, but it's just something for us to look at as we trend.
For schools to have a stronger fundraising, I said ours was 4%, part of that is fundraising. What does that number look like, that other category, for schools that do a stronger job of fundraising?
We have 2 schools that do a really great job of that, and it's in the 10% range.
Okay.
And I think from the overall revenue side, the 2 schools I'm thinking about in the same total revenues range as y'all are, so they're about 10%.
Okay.
So So on the $8 million budget, they're raising about $800K a year.
Yes. They've done an outstanding job, the two schools I'm talking about, done an outstanding job doing that.
Learn a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was
Thank you.
very,
Appreciate it.
very helpful.
Sure, and if there's any questions that you want to follow up with me, please, I'm free anytime, well, not anytime, but I'll be glad to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Babbington's going to complete his director's report.
Then we have the 2020-21 school calendar before you. The faculty has reviewed it, and this is what they recommend. And according to Brad Williams, we do need to get it passed because he has to do some things with scheduling, and we can't do anything until this is passed. I think it pretty much resembles this past year.
No major changes from current?
So, I remember that we go by like hours of instruction as our state
Correct.
requirement, right? And then the local county goes by days of instruction.
You have to go by the, you have the option of going by one or the other. You can go 180 days or 1,025, 1,000 and some odd number of hours of instruction.
Do our teachers, are they required to teach the same number of equivalent days as the county teachers?
You talking about Johnson County?
Mhm.
No. Our calendar reflects 165 days, and Johnson County Schools reflects 180 days.
So it's 15 extra days of instruction that if they were to teach in the county, they would be required to administer?
That's correct.
But the days here are longer.
Or longer. We still
So we have
still
the
need the
same
minimum
number of
number of
instructional
hours.
minutes.
Well, I think, according to Brad, we're about 50 hours over the minimum.
I don't see the last day of purple for it. It's May, is it in May or June? There's no,
That Q is the quarter, end of the quarter.
I'm guessing it must be the 19th.
That's the end of the fourth quarter, so that would be the last day.
because you had a purple for the first day, I didn't know. So May the 19th, you're saying is the last day?
Correct.
Yes. I remember one of the points last year was, after the discussion was, how many days at Thanksgiving was acceptable. I mean, if we're, and our days are a little bit longer, so without doing the math, I don't know how many instructional minutes that equates to, because it's 15 days is 10%.
He just said that we are 50 hours above
Above the
minimum
state.
hours, which means we're 50 hours over 180 days worth.
Worth of things, so that's what they do. Okay, so instructional time, we're actually above what,
Right.
that's what,
Yeah.
So,
Originally, the charter schools were given the freedom to have 1,000 or more hours of instruction during the year. The traditional schools didn't have that flexibility. They had to go 180 days regardless. And so the traditional folks fussed enough, so they said, you got to measure us by the same stick that you measure charter schools. So then they changed the law, said that all schools can either go by 180 or the 1,025 hours.
okay, so just one, because I think this came up last year, I can't remember when, but if you end, and I don't know if you've checked, if for CCP, if your last day of school is after, when's graduation?
I don't know, do you know when graduation is?
The graduation would
In
be that Friday or
2021.
Saturday, the 19th or 20th, whatever.
The 21st is a Friday.
That would be the logical time for it.
Yes, so because we did look at CCP to make sure that we were able to do the summer school things I was talking
But
about.
if we start before you graduate, I can't remember, I don't know.
You mean your
You
summer program?
start after we graduate, because we have to be,
No, you can't be a graduate,
Can't
they
be
won't get
graduate.
they
so
won't
that it's
get,
before, whichever one it is.
well, it's probably 4 because we never start the last weekend in, spring 2020.
So basically, if graduation's on the 21st, you have to make sure that the CC programs start at minimum on the
On the
24th.
No, before it.
Before, you can't be a graduate and get the free tuition. May 17th. Okay. So a senior could start, yeah, and get their free tuition because they haven't graduated yet. But once you graduate, you don't get, you can't take advantage of that summer.
So I guess that's why we did that.
Moved it later, yeah, well, good, because I think this year, it doesn't match and they graduate before our summer session starts and they can't take the free classes.
Oh, okay. And you say yours is the 17th?
That was 2021.
Yeah, 20.
Okay,
So I was
So for
looking
next
at
year,
that.
we're good. On that calendar, we're good for that.
okay,
This year, I think, you
Yes.
graduate before.
okay.
Any other questions? I entertain a motion if we want to accept it.
Yes, Thanksgiving last year, you did this too.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think this is similar to what you had this past year,
Yeah, we did it.
the whole week.
I mean, I think I remember discussions about, was that too long?
Oh, having the whole week off.
Yeah.
I think the reason that from last year, the discussion was is that there were students that were traveling that week, and I think the teachers were saying, if I remember correctly, that the classrooms were not full.
On Monday, Tuesday, anyway.
Doesn't impact us. if we don't travel.
Well, classrooms would not be full too because teachers say we're not going to do anything.
Right, right.
So then you're basically telling the student, you don't have to come. But, I mean, that's fine. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion passed.
Okay, thank you.
As info, the county schools, I looked it up there, spring break is April 7th through 9th, 2021, so we match our whole time.
Yeah, I think they try to do that.
There's always a question about that.
Because sometimes you have parents that have children here, some in the traditional school, so
Exactly.
you want to try to match up as best you can. All right. I was asked to bring a tentative enrollment plan. Of course, it's very difficult to do that sort of thing at this time because we're still finishing up the assessments to figure out who's making progress towards the next grade. Plus, you kind of wanted to have a plan to see, okay, where does this need to go in terms of enrollment? I had 3 columns, if you look at the plan that you have in your packet. Present, what your present enrollment is got the numbers from the data manager, and then what I would call the ideal, and then what I think is realistic. In this plan, I tried to do 3 things. Build a strong K-2 program, because I think anything that you do at your school is built on your K-2 program. If they don't get it there, it's really difficult to catch them up later on. So that's where I want to build things. So in the ideal, of course, you would have about 80 students and 4 teachers and 4 teacher assistants in kindergarten, first and second grade. That's different from what you have now. You have first grade, you have 3, second grade, you have 3, teacher assistants in first grade, you have 2, and second grade, you have 1. So this would give you a teacher and a teacher assistant in every grade from kindergarten through 3rd grade. That would be ideal. Now that, as we talked about money tonight, that may be out of reach as far as what you have to pay, other kinds of things. Maybe realistic, look back at full-time teacher assistants in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2 assistants in 2nd grade, and share there.
What is the class size for kindergarten?
if you take, let's say what I'm recommending, 80, you'd have 20.
No, I mean, what currently?
Oh, currently, you take 73 divided by 40, which would make it about 17.
Well, I thought that was state law, you can have over 18.
Oh, no.
We need to.
So we have 17 kids in each of the,
Sure.
Presently, if you take 73 and divide it by, you have 4 teachers.
and so you want to raise it to 20 per class?
You know,
I'm just asking.
yeah, well, I just picked round numbers that would make it easy to see and divide. But now if we can manage it with 17 in a class, that's great.
Well, I mean, your ideal is, in terms of teachers and TAs, is the same as what we presently have, 4 teachers, 4 TAs. So I'm just saying for kindergarten, you're kind of set, you're saying 17, 4, that's fine.
Right.
Okay, so just for clarity, General Statute 115C301, it will require for kindergarten an average of 18 and no more than 21. For first grade, average of 16, no more than 19, and for second and third
For first grade, average is 16. That doesn't make sense.
We just need to clarify.
And no more than how many?
For which one?
First grade?
For first grade, average of 16 and no more than 19.
Well, we're not there.
And for second and third grade, average of 17 and no more than 20.
That's for the 21-22 school year.
Oh, okay, then we definitely have to make some changes because we're over that on first and second.
Yes.
And our average right now in kindergarten is 18, just over 18, not 17.
I remember that 18 number in kindergarten because that's why we had 4
Yeah.
18s, because that we would reduce to 3 in first grade, and then that 3 would cover all the way through the system.
So now I will point out that that does not apply to charters. That's your traditional public schools.
Okay.
Is there anything in our charter about class size?
There is.
That is small.
Right
No,
now,
I didn't know if there was a specific, I couldn't remember if there was a
There's
specific.
nothing, I mean, there's not like a list, but I mean, when we reviewed the charter, then there was the philosophical question about.
Small class size.
Small class size was one of the points of the school.
So what the law is, so I guess for traditional schools, for 19-20 school year, current school year, average of 19, no more than 22, it does not specify, it just says for K through 3. And then for 2021, which is next year, K through 3, average of 18, no more than 21.
But I'm all for the smaller class size for that.
So did this, your ideal, the middle column is what you're trying to reach for?
No, more realistic,
Okay,
because I know you don't have
realistic.
the money for it.
But does this come with a budget estimate?
No, we haven't looked at the budget yet.
Okay.
That will come when we get our real numbers. 'Cause these are just estimates right now.
Well, I mean, what do you want us to do with the estimates? And you have no budget with it, what do you,
Just for knowledge right now.
okay,
So
so,
we're beginning the process.
okay.
but your realistic for second grade still has 25 kids in a grade, in a class.
Because we're gonna have to,
And that's, you think that's because you think that's what's realistic?
That's just what we have.
Right.
I mean, I would love to see it reduced. However, one, do you have the space? And 2, do you have the funds to be able to fund that in classrooms?
You either have to, you can't keep kids out, so
Oh,
you
I
have
know that, yeah,
to
yeah.
up another classroom.
Right.
That are moving out.
I mean, or that's the key, at the rate we
Yes.
treat,
You don't.
you know,
You don't bring in-
that's like the bowl grade. I don't understand why we haven't resolved that in years. At the rate we attrit, I don't understand why we didn't address that. But I think we got to figure out quantity versus quality and the associated cost.
So,
Yeah, I think, what was your question?
so I think my question is, so I hear you saying that K2 is really, really important, but even in your ideal scenario, you've increased the number of teachers we have, you've increased the number of students we have, we're still looking at 20 kids per class, and that would be your recommendation of where we should be moving forward.
As opposed to 25.
Right, but if we're talking ideal, is that really what you think is ideal, or are you still really trying to be realistic for us?
I'm trying to-
Like ideally,
Ideally, I'm going down 15 or 17 as
Okay.
well.
All right, that's what I'm wondering.
It's kind of hard to reach that far when you
Sure.
have 25 or 26 already in the class.
Gotcha. All right. Just curious.
Okay.
But,
Well, I don't know.
next time I can come back, next month, I can come back with more concrete numbers and budgetary numbers that goes along with that.
Yeah, I just want us to be clear to ourselves. I mean, just because there's 200 classes, it may not be very unrealistic at all. You could possibly make it in 1 year if you go look at attrition rates.
If you don't backfill.
Yeah, if you don't backfill, how many students leave in a year? And if you just don't backfill them, you started at 25, you may exit the year with 20.
So,
Right.
But
So
you
I-
also have to look at what the financial
That's
impact
right.
is to that after Jay just left, because we are enrollment driven in terms of our revenue, over 70-something. So if we start making that determination that the quality of what we do, then that is going to hit our revenue.
Sure.
could you potentially include, when you come back, what an ideal target range for students per class at each grade would be, sort of separate from this, so that we can say, not necessarily so we're looking at the total number of students in that grade divided by the number of teachers, but so we could say, if our target in first grade is 19 kids, can we support 4 classes? Which gets to what you're saying, which is keeping our enrollment higher, but paying for 4 teachers, right? Which we already have in first grade, but like in second grade. But if you could maybe add that data to this, I think it would help me at least try to balance enrollment, which is really, really important because we're driven funding that way, and quality instruction, class size, and all of that. And then I think we can get to some of the give and take and push and pull that way a little bit.
And I'm not saying one cancels the other.
I
It
hear
is completely possible
Right.
to be a large, very high quality, high performing school.
Yes,
So,
yes, I wasn't saying that.
but I think yeah, if you could come back, I mean, if you just want to present what you feel is the ideal, and regardless of, the present and the realistic, because I'm not quite sure, you're gonna have to make a choice. Should it be ideal or realistic, and then present that. And some of these things are, I agree with Ronnie, completely doable if we look at phases and target areas and where do we start. This is not like a sweeping thing for the entire school, but we can usher in some of these things, maybe just focusing on K through 2 first, and then see how can we get there.
And build from there.
And build from there.
Yeah.
Well, because, especially K through 2 is the area where you need and really want targeted. That's why I wanted K through 12, the smallest class sizes, right? So we could theoretically add, teachers K2 if we needed to, and not necessarily have to add them cascading all the way up, because
Right.
the classes get bigger, right?
I know
So
that,
we could
you're
support
going to have
that.
some attrition because people are going to move
Right.
out of Johnson County going somewhere else. So you're going to have some of that.
Right,
So you'll have some
and larger
attrition.
class sizes, so.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this a number of times over the years. Is it a column review where you expect the same number comes in as the same number that goes out 13 years later in 12th grade? Well, you can have that if your product is there and you always backfill 1 for 1. I mean, the same number will show, right? Or you can have a pyramid model where they come in, they stay for a certain minute, and then as you get further and further towards the finish line, you plan for not backfilling in the attrition. I mean, because we've had this discussion. I mean, you bring somebody in, middle way through their senior year or their senior year, The whole purpose of the K through 12 is we rule for the whole. So I'm saying when we think about enrollment manager over a 13-year span, there's a couple of different ways we should look at it.
Yeah, if you notice, we start out in the realistic, we start out with 80 and end up with 60. So we lost 20 on the way. So there is some of that already here.
Well, the other thing is looking at your wait list. The trend in the wait list is very heavy on, you know, you have a lot of people to pull from kindergarten, whatever, to backfill. Not as many as you get into the upper grade, so that kind of, you know, ties our hand a little bit because we can't manage the bottom end because there's nothing to pull from at the top.
But on the other end, when you get to the top, you've got to have enough students there that you can offer quality as well as the variety that they need to get wherever they want to go.
I mean, I think that's your target market is high school. I think we kind of haven't done too much to pull students to transfer either late middle school or high school. And that's our pain point in terms of losing students. And kindergarten, I mean, the elementary, they're flooded. I mean, the waiting list for K is huge.
And the reality is that the market, to me, we should be able to pull kids in here to come for high school. If we have a high quality product, we should have people wanting to come.
And it also has to be a product that maybe doesn't look like traditional high schools, because, I mean, quite frankly, that's what students are looking for, and that's what parents are looking for. If we're stuck in this, in 5 years from now, you know, you pull up a time capsule, it's always schools that look exactly the same. Tables and chairs, somebody in the front, and I just think we gotta stretch ourselves to say that is not how this generation wants to necessarily maneuver within a school. I mean, that they manipulate content so differently now than 20 years ago, but the bottom line is, technically, we still teach like we teach 50 years ago. Teacher in front, tables and chairs, open your book. And we're gonna lose, because if we don't do it, our competitor will do it, and then we're stuck.
Was your view that we were constrained to 60 in a realistic?
I can't hear you.
Was your view that we're looking at 60 in high school because you were anticipating not a higher demand as you get closer to the finish line? I'm just trying to understand the logic.
I think you put in an attrition model.
Yeah,
essay.
that people are going to move out of Johnson County and not backfill.
Okay.
That was my thinking.
I just wanted to make sure it's not constrained by resources like physical. Because like Dawn said, if your product is high enough at high school, I mean, I know a school within 45 minutes here to add 1,500 applicants for 120 slots. Mm-hmm. Give them a virtual option, School of Science and Math, they're going to come from everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we think that if the product's right, it should be way more than 60.
Well, and it may be have a large waiting list, but my thinking was not to, let's say, have 80 spots there and have to go find 20 students to fill that spot, and make the school operate.
Yeah.
We know there's going to be attrition in it,
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
so we'll expect that.
just begin the thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing is spring tutoring. We have identified some students that have not received extra services here at the school, and they're still struggling a little bit. We've just finished the last quarter of in class, and we've identified some students that need some extra help.
How many?
Well, I don't have an exact number because the teachers are still working on that, trying to narrow that down and figure out who fits and who doesn't, and who really needs it and who doesn't. Trying to make sure we've got everybody covered. And we also having to make sure we've got teachers to cover those classes. We did put the survey out there to see how many teachers would be willing to come and teach. We've got some that said they can do part of the time and some another part of the time. So we're having to piecemeal together to get all of the classes covered. But talking to Dr. Schwartzlander, she said that she thinks she's got it covered now by piecemeal. I would anticipate something like 10, no more than 10 to 15 in the class. during the tutoring session. And we would use the extra duty model, pay each teacher about $500 for the 3 months. That would be about $1,500 for 3 months of work. And it would cost us about $36,000. I've gone through the budget line by line, individual by individual, and I've identified some areas that we can pull from that it won't cost anything extra. I can pull it out of the budget.
So, I'm struggling with, how do you know you need 20 tutors if you don't know how many students you have right now? I'm wondering how you got these numbers when you can't tell me how many students are going to be in this program.
This was a projection, and I had the test scores, and I looked at the test scores and kind of estimated, but I can't give you an exact number because that's going to move around right now.
So you've estimated it based on
What?
a number?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, yeah. I mean, I don't think, I know I personally can't approve anything and you're not giving me the, is this 10 kids? So now you might say $36,000 for 10 kids. Is this 250 kids? I mean, how many kids do you have to tutor? You got 20 tutors. That's a lot of tutors.
It is, but you got, I mean, we're talking about 10 kids per class, so that would be about 200 kids total.
So you think it's about 200?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So can I ask a couple of questions too?
Sure.
Are you talking one-on-one tutoring?
Oh,
tutoring small
no, this
groups?
is as a group.
Okay, and
This would be about an hour after school each, on those days that I have noted, and then 3 hours on Saturday.
1 hour after
So,
school,
okay, 1 hour.
3 hours on Saturday.
Is this required?
Well, you can't make them come. You offer, and 90% of them are going to come.
On Saturday?
Small groups.
If they know that this is going to help their child make it to the next grade.
And sorry, so you've got $500 per month of extra duty pay for each of the tutors, but you said not every tutor was going to be working the same amount. So they get the same amount of pay
No,
regardless of...
prorate. It would prorate.
Prorate, okay.
And
This is your estimate based on,
the $500 comes from, without having to come up with a whole new pay scale in our extra duty pay structure, there is a level that is $500.
Gotcha.
So does that break down to an hourly rate?
With the math, it comes around $35, $40 an hour, based on the total hours.
To tutor?
and
Well, I'm gonna come work here then.
and on the numbers.
Well, as we were flooding this, one of the teachers said, I get paid $50 an hour to do it privately. So I didn't think we could go that high. So we settled on about 12 years ago, I did offer the tutoring to my teachers, and I paid them $45 an hour. But that's been quite a few years ago. So I figure the rate is about what the market is.
So on something like
Oh, wait,
this,
no, 'cause I didn't take out the
you'll be notifying the parents that your child and
Yes.
okay, that make sure that gets out to them and
Oh, yes.
encouraged.
We would send them a letter saying that your child is
Yeah.
struggling and we want to provide this extra help so that
Right.
your child will be successful in math in the grade test.
So what curriculum are you using within the tutoring? What are you using to
The
tutor?
teachers are using the curriculum they're already using. They're going back over the skills that they're, and I encourage the teachers that are teaching them now because they know the children and they know where their weak spots are and they know where their strengths are. So they can plug right in and you're just giving some extra time. Instead of having 25 in a class, you now have 10 and you can really focus on those 10 and where their discrepancies are.
So when you say small groups, you could have a group of 10 with one teacher? Wow. Okay. That's like remediation, it's not really tutoring.
Right.
The way now-
It's like remediation, it's not really tutoring.
Yeah.
Because tutoring is typically not more than 2 or 3 students, right? So when you talk small groups, that's where I thought you were, was like 2 or 3. But I guess numerically, if we have 200 kids and 20 tutors, that's where you are, okay. So basically remediation, typically from the classroom teachers that they have.
Yes,
You
that's
know.
what I prefer, but some of the classroom teachers, no, I've got a dance over here and karate over here, and, you know, they have a life after school.
Sure, well, and it
As
could
do
be,
the kids.
yeah.
Pardon?
As do kids.
But
But it could be good for them to have a different teaching
Can be.
style in front of them too. So
Could
I,
be.
you know, I was just curious.
yeah, could be.
I wasn't, yeah.
That does happen, because a different style will speak to a child differently, and
Well,
sometimes.
that's why I mean, what are they going to be doing for the hour?
They're going to be focusing mostly on math. I suggested that they spend about 65 to 70% of their time on math, focusing on this specific skills that those kids are either missing or lacking. And
So if it's not their student, do they have some kind of assessment that says Johnny's
there will be
issue is that
communication
he...
from the regular teacher to
Okay.
that tutoring teacher. These are the skills, this is what Johnny needs to work on, blah, 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 blah.
So it may be different because Johnny just maybe can't multiply, but somebody else, so
Right.
I mean, that,
They'll be different, and they'll group them together in teachable groups.
So will they be in the same group every time that they come for tutoring?
or with the
They
same
may, I mean,
teacher.
if they need to, but, you know, the tutor may say, oh, well, she's really catching on pretty fast, I'm gonna move her over here to this group.
No, but I'm saying like, if I'm a tutor, do I have the same 10 kids every time that I come in? Or am I gonna have, do I have to prep every time
No,
to
no,
know
no,
who
you
they
have to
are?
say, unless the tutor says, wait a minute, this girl is way ahead of anybody I've got, and, you know, you're teaching a different group, can she fit in your group? That is, I would advocate, okay, move that child over to that group so she's challenged. But if she needs to stay here, she stays right here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except if you don't have the same tutor straight through, you're gonna have the tutors communicating with each other about where Johnny and Sally are in their, right? So I guess I think I'm tracking with Dawn that I'm a little bit concerned about the logistics of how, yeah, that's a great word, logistics of how it's gonna work and how much prep time the teachers are gonna have to have for this. And, you know, I mean, you guys are the experts, but it sounds like a lot.
Well, it is a lot. But folks, that integrate test is going to be on us pretty soon, so we've got to get moving. And it's kind of like you build the plane as you fly. It's not the way we want to do it, but this is what we got.
So also in support of this, we talked a number of times about like getting, you know, some of our other students involved from a community give back and National Honor Society and whatever. I mean, I look at this stuff like, I mean, if we focus, I mean, it kind of needs to be an all hands on deck for these kids. $36,000, you know, do the best we can to do the best job we can and exhaust all our resources. And we should even look for opportunities where we can leverage people that are willing to do it and not even get paid if they're there. I mean, I cast the net far and wide and try to do it with as much quality as we can. I mean, like I said, we're in February.
Well, I think you could tap into that resource to have extra hands in the classroom.
That's
That'd be
If
great.
you have a volunteer in the classroom with 10 kids and you've got the teacher, and she said, well, go over there and work with this kid right here on division, okay? So yeah, we can tap into that. That would be a plus, but I think you've got to have that paid employee there.
Are you gonna do a mid-session assessment that you're tracking some movement on their progress? I mean, what are you assessing that, oh, it's working, or are you just gonna, there's some kind of something?
For this amount of time, I think the only assessment we're going to have is at the end of grade test, to see that they move from point A to point B by the end of the year. That's our goal.
Well, if they start on February 18th, you can do an assessment the week of March 16th to see if that needle is moving at all, and then you adjust. If not, you might be doing the wrong thing for the entire time, and you have no, I mean, that's within how we educate.
Well,
doing it.
well, the teacher will do their own assessment. I don't want to do any more, quote, formal
No, I'm
assessment.
saying, is that built into what they know to do, that everybody says, okay, by that end of Saturday, the week of March 23rd, is somebody doing so well that maybe they don't even have to come anymore, and half of the people are still struggling and haven't moved an inch, then you gotta regroup
Right.
to do the rest of the weeks.
That's why we pay them what we pay them. That's their professional duty.
Okay, but if someone doesn't say that's the process for this tutoring, what I'm looking at is, I'm not gonna say spend $36,000 if I don't see a structured program that I think is gonna get the results. So I'm just trying to throw out little elements that would make it a little bit more structured, that I feel like that's gonna happen before we just say, spend $36,000. I mean, because a lot of people spend a lot of stuff, and it has not done a darn thing to help a student move the needle. So if we're gonna put in this money, you know, in the March meeting, you can report out that our students are doing phenomenal with the tutoring, and we've seen.
I can do that.
Okay.
Mr. Griffin, what type of, I think you said that you've done this previously before. What type of results did you see in having done it previously?
From one end to the other, we had some that didn't move the needle at all. I think most, probably 70 to 80%, did move. Some moved drastically because they just needed that. It depended on where the child is and if they're receptive. Now, some come because mama made me come, and they sit there and do nothing. Well, I can't do much with that. But, you know, one that really, I know I'm behind and I want to catch up. If you got one that's motivated, you can move it because you got their attention.
So it seems to me that here at the end of January, you've tried to put together something that kicks off fairly soon, organized as quickly as you can with those that are willing to spend time and take extra pay for us to do this, to organize and making sure you're notifying the parents to do it. And, you know, it'd be wonderful to have a much more organized plan from the get-go, but right now this is where we're at, and so it seems like that's our option for right now.
I'm not saying it's not an option, that doesn't mean you can present things that we're spending a lot of money on that don't have key elements in it. That's all it's like a lesson plan, you know?
So, I mean, I get it. I would like to see the content, the qualifications of the people. We clearly don't have that. I mean, are we comfortable with, saying a midpoint assessment with some vision of how are we doing so that we don't spend the second half? I mean, maybe we get to 18,000 midpoint and say, the people are not showing up or the kids are not coming. I mean, we just don't spend the extra 18. I mean, is a midpoint assessment kind of what?
Yeah, you already said you can do a midpoint, so we would expect that the week of March 16th.
Well, I do have a question, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, and Nikki might be able to help, even though I know this is 3 through 8. But if we're looking, I worry about setting precedents, right? So we're setting a precedent that this is what we would typically pay for tutoring, that we set a precedent for kind of how many, sort of the structure. And I wonder, is this something that we would be comfortable doing all of next year, which would be double this, right? If we did it both semesters. Or are we only going to be doing it in the spring semester? Like, are we just doing this right now because we absolutely need to get these kids on their EOG scores, and I agree with that and support that. But I also think that we need to be fairly clear that this is kind of like right now, all hands on deck. Intervention, and maybe we can have something that, to sort of what Paul was saying, have something a little more formulated that is planned for next year.
So I'm assuming
that would be my question.
I would assume if we were doing it for an entire year, as opposed to just these 3 months, that the amount of time would be spread out. You would not be meeting 4 days a week for
You
tutoring.
would kill the students and the teachers. They wouldn't matter. But I'm hoping that the idea is going to get out there, that eventually we're going to get to the point where if you're not ready to move to the next grade, you're not going.
Sure.
We can't do that now. We've got so many gaps and holes, we couldn't come close to doing that. That would be,
Well,
but eventually, if we get to the point that,
You say you're moving kids along to the next grade and they don't deserve it?
How many we retained last year?
I can't answer for last year.
No.
So let's don't even go there. I'm just saying, in the traditional way of thinking, that whether you're at the grade level and ready to move on, you move on because you are a year older.
Social promotion.
I don't want to call it that, but I'm hoping we can reframe that.
Yes.
So that in the parents' minds, in the children's mind, hey, this school expects me to be there. And if I don't get there, they're going to expect me to do some extra work or spend extra time getting there.
Right.
That's the kind of
Yeah.
thought process I want to get in place. And this is just a start, just the beginning of that.
To be clear, I fully support the idea of tutoring, ongoing tutoring. We've talked about a learning lab, we've talked about and that's why I was sort of pushing about 10 students is great, it's better than what we have now, but to me, that's really not where we want to be focused, that's not really enough. I understand why that's what we're talking about now, but what I'm trying to get across is, I just want to make sure that when we're asking teachers to do this, and when we're talking to students and families and everything, that this is something that is an intervention for this year, and that it is not something that should be expected, because when you start talking about extra duty pay, I think teachers sometimes think that could be an ongoing thing that they might get the following year and those kinds of things. I just want to make sure we're being really direct and clear on that.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
And as the teachers are identifying the students to participate in the tutoring, are they, or is administration or the teachers, are they looking at reasons why they might be in this situation, whether it's attendance, or is it something with the teacher, or are we looking at all of those things as well?
I think they're looking at as many factors as they can find. If it's an attendance problem, if they don't attend regular school, I don't see how they're going to attend the tutoring sessions. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If we I don't know that we can handle every child that needs it. And if we have to say, well, you're not invited because you don't come to school anyway. That may be one that we would have to say, well, no. But I don't know. I can't give you the answers to all those numbers because we haven't gotten that far down the river.
We just started talking today about M-class results. So this morning I met with kindergarten, first grade with M-class results. So based on the conversations I had this morning with just K1, in each grade level there's at least 12 kids that are still red, which means that they're below grade level. So those would be the kids that we would put on the list first. So based on their M-class results, they're not moving, they're still red in the middle of the year, we need to give them some extra support. So we talked about extra support within the regular school day, but then we have this additional time and intensity that we can give them based on specific information with M-class. They do have some math things that they do as well. It's not as formalized as M-class, but they do have some data to show, at least for kindergarten, first grade. So I'm making an assumption. I haven't been to third grade PLC yet.
They have their check-ins.
They have their check-ins, they have their
Results
M-class.
from the check-in last week, are we using those results to
Yes.
help select students too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're tracking them as they move from the beginning of the year to now.
Right.
And they look to see where they are. Yeah, we use all that information.
Okay.
Is this typical in schools? And I don't know the answer to this. I mean, is this typical to have 12 students in a class that mid-year they're not at grade level? Or is this something that is more
The class has
specific?
18,
It's more
18, 19?
No, that's not
It's more
one class, that's
specific.
one grade.
One grade level.
One grade
One grade, not one
Okay.
class.
For the entire kindergarten,
Okay.
there's 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
For first grade, there's maybe about 10.
Okay, so
With
it would-
kindergarten, you find kindergartners developing slower, but as from, say, March to May, you see them speed up. it's just an adjustment for kindergartners.
So
I
these
see it.
numbers, the numbers that we're seeing are typical in schools across the board. It's not something specific to here, where we need to identify maybe an issue that's going on in the classroom, or, so it's something, is it something typical?
It's typical in my experience. It's not unusual to have 10 to 12 kids in the middle of the year who are still struggling. And then that's when you typically really talk about what are we going to do more of differently or better for these kids, because now we've done beginning to middle of year instruction, it's not working for them. So what are we going to do differently moving forward? And it has to be time and intensity. They have to have more time and intensity on what they're struggling with. So it's not an unusual thing.
For the weekdays, do we consider, 2 days a week, hour and a half per session, instead of 3 days, 1 hour? Same amount of instruction time, but doing 2 days a week instead of 3 days?
I looked at what I thought a child could handle after staying in school all day.
Right.
I thought an hour, about what they, if you go an hour and a half, but they're sleeping half the time. So I thought an hour.
And what time?
And I put snacks in here too, because you need to feed them a little bit.
And what time is Saturday?
From 8 to 12. I mean, 8 to 11, I think it is. Or 9 to 12, I did it right. 3 hours. Certainly just in there.
Will students be allowed to come, let's say that if they can't come 2 days, but they can come the other 2 days of the week? Will they allow to be participate if they can't participate fully?
If we think we can make a difference, move them on the needle, yes.
Or just come to 3 days and they can't come Saturday? Okay. So they have some, they can
There's some
figure out what
flexibility,
works
yes.
the schedule. Okay.
I make a motion to approve the tutoring recommendation.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'll just say the discussion is, I think what you've heard collective from us is, this is a shot of adrenaline in the system to set precedents, but as we look towards next year, whether it's Learning Lab, whether it's whatever, is our culture of instruction is that the availability for early identification, to get additional help, that's got to be ingrained in who we are every day, not as we don't plan to do this every year.
Yeah.
So if we're looking and we're talking about, from a money standpoint, $36,000 on approximately 200 students.
And just so you know, there's 100, basically.
$36,000, excuse me.
Basically what's happening here, there was a $100,000 line item in our budget for this year to pay out full bonuses. With the existing staffing model, we didn't make the target last year, so we didn't pay it out. So you're taking $36,000, that 100 that would have went to bonuses across the institution. If we'd have met our targets, we didn't make them, so we're going to take part of that money and be more surgical.
So there's no curriculum materials that come with this?
I put in the budget about $3,000. I told the teachers, I said, now, if you can find something that is really on target, let me know what that is, and we'll get it here ASAP.
Okay.
But if not, use what they're used to, because then they don't have to go back and gear up.
So, but are they considering any kind of software? Do you know?
I don't know. I put that out there, that this is money that theirs would be there. If this passes, it's there. So if you've got software or whatever you need, just let us know, and we'll get it ASAP. Because, the clock's ticking.
Who's managing this program? Who is managing the program? Is it one of the academy leaders?
The academy leaders and myself.
Okay.
And I think this will be mostly Amanda, because this fits her grades, not more than this is grades 3 through 8, which is
So
her.
is there a possibility that the amount may be more or less? Or is this the maximum?
What?
Could-
The 36,000?
36,000, could it be less depending on the number of students that are actually identified and that choose to participate?
Sure.
You keep getting 2 people on a Saturday, I would think we would call, we would mix the Saturday.
Do I know?
If like no one comes on Saturday, at some
Oh.
point you probably just say,
Yeah,
let's mix the
I'm not going
Saturday.
to throw money
Yeah,
away.
yeah, okay.
I never have. Don't plan on starting now.
We have a motion and a second and discussion. Are you ready to call for the vote? All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh my God, this whole time, we should, Nicole told someone to take the minutes, and I forgot to.
It's on recording.
Oh, okay. She asked us that, I just realized that when we, because we need to note the, okay. I won't panic. Unless the battery dies.
In reference to the audit report tonight, I prepared this. Rodney asked me to do this sometime back. So what I thought is in January of each year, begin the process of securing bids for performing the annual audit. And then March, sign a contract. October, the audit report is due to Board of Directors. In November, or submitted to NUC. That would be the process. And I would recommend, once you get the, do the company that you use now, this coming year, but then look at getting bids from at least 3 companies to see. That's just my recommendation. That's what I did in the past. About every 3 years, I asked for bids to see, one, if their prices were similar. And sometimes it's good to get a different company, because sometimes they come in and get you get the same results every year.
So our contract ends February 20th, that's the end of our 3-year contract, or
No,
that?
if I remember right, we did 2 year in the beginning, and then we went through the year after that. But I like the idea of a multi-year, because it's kind of ridiculous to do this every year.
Yeah, okay.
The only comment I have on something like that is it'd be up to 3 years, that it's renewable unless it's renewable at a level other than board action. In other words, if things are not perfect, if it's not, they're not doing a job, you could.
They're not meeting the terms.
You can terminate. You can terminate.
Thank you. Right.
Yep. That would be part of your contract.
Or it's more of a passive, where we decided not to renew, we get somebody else, rather than saying we're breaking our contract. It's, when you get into that, sometimes it's a little easier to just say, we decided not to renew. So,
If you can get them to sign that kind of contract.
they will. I think they will. I mean, that's how a lot of consulting contracts are done that way, that are general services that have been in, or 3 years.
Do we need to vote on that, or is there anything specific?
That's your choice.
Well, we need to get the process started for this year. I know before the school had the actual RFP we did for the original audit, so we just need to get that process started now, because it's already it's already February.
Right.
So are we going to use, what is it, RISE?
No, I'm saying that, no, if we're going to go through an RFP process this year, we need to start that process, or are we going to go another year and then invoke the whole RFP process next year? My recommendation is just go with Reed's another year, given where we're at.
Yeah, that's what this is right here.
That's what I was doing.
Oh,
This year's
okay.
taken in next year.
And then suggested this for the next year.
Yeah, you had so many changes this year. I think.
Yes.
I make a motion we approve Reed's for our auditor for next year.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
Okay. Nikki?
My turn?
All right. So in your packet is some requests from Senior Academy, and then one request about our substitute teacher pool. So I'll start with the first one. The Senior Academy is requesting a reduction of graduation credit requirements from 27 to 24, beginning with our rising ninth graders. Some of our rationale for that is, under our current system, we require 27 credits to graduate. Our block system, by the time you end 4 years, you really have 32 credits on your transcript potentially, and it creates a need for 5 additional classes that aren't really necessary for kids. So we're creating classes so that kids have places to go, not necessarily because the classes are meaningful and purposeful for them. The state of North Carolina requires 22 credits to graduate. Johnston County requires 22. The UNC system requires 24. So we would still be aligned with our college mindset of wanting to get our kids into the UNC system. Reducing credits would also allow us to maximize staff and space. Currently, we have to create classes to fill a schedule, which is very taxing to our staff and resources. So for example, for spring semester, we have 4 classes with less than 10 students, and then 9 classes with less than 15 students. So we're not really maximizing our teachers' space or time. We're just making up classes so that we can fill them. Reducing the quantity of classes will also reduce the number of preps that teachers have. So currently I have teachers are teaching anywhere from 2 to 4 classes a day. So that requires them to prepare for 2 to 4 different classes every day with a 75-minute planning period. It is our belief that if we reduce the number of classes that teachers have to prepare for, that we can go deeper and we can have quality over quantity for our kids. Less classes gives us more flexibility to access JCC classes or NCBPS or the NCSSM model. It gives us some more flexibility to be able to access those types of programs. On the flip side of that, the Senior Academy needs to do a better job with our rising 9th graders to let them know that they have access to all of these different ways of getting their diploma and deciding which is the path that they want to go on. A review of 4 K-12 charter schools, and I named them for you, and 1 9-12 charter school, 1 6 through 12 charter school, shows that all of them are doing 22 to 24 credits to graduate. East Wake Academy requires 28, we require 27. Of those schools that are doing 22 to 24 credits, I believe all but 1 is an A-rated school. We are B, East Wake is, we're a C, all right, next year we're gonna be a B. And then we're a C school, East Wake is a B school. I don't know if there's a correlation there, but the 2 schools I looked at with 28, 27 credits right now are the ones who are performing at a lower level than the others.
So the idea is that more is always not the best.
Right. Sometimes more is not better. This proposal and these discussions started with the Master Schedule Committee, and I know that I have brought up the Master Schedule Committee several times, and that committee brought this idea to high school staff informally, and then we presented it to staff in a more formal manner on January 6th when we had our staff professional development day. Through those talks and feedback and getting some informal and formal feedback from parents, a majority are on board with reducing the credits, that they do feel like it will be better for our system to do that. Some of the concern is that we will be limiting the number of AP courses offered to our students, or students might not have as many choices on the classes that they take. And we believe with purposeful and systemic master scheduling that we can continue to provide our students with rigorous coursework, first and foremost, that's what we're here to do. The choices for electives won't be reduced, but the number of electives that actually make it onto the master schedule will be less. So it will be based on interest. So if we have a lot of kids interested in certain electives, then that's what we'll offer, rather than having 10 or 12 kids in a class at a time. If you have any questions, let me know. We are asking if we could vote on this in February to reduce our graduation requirements from 27 to 24 so that we can submit an addendum to the state to amend our charter. Yes.
So I appreciate all the background. And I really support the idea, especially of doing a better job with our rising 9th graders.
Mm-hmm.
My question, well, I 2 questions sort of about the same thing. So when we talk about doing a better job and having more systemic planning and everything, I think part of the concern is that I don't think we do a great job of mapping the entire 4 years, right?
Right.
So is that what you're talking about in that systemic,
Yes.
you know, helping with the rising ninth graders? Okay, great.
And I'm working on that plan right now with Master Schedule Committee and on my own, because I do want parents to know that if your student is choosing to do the CCP route, this is what their 4 years is going to look like.
Right.
If Sally wants to do mostly AP classes, this is what your 4 years
Great.
theoretically could look like. If you want to do NCBPS or NCSSM or how, you know, let's present these options to parents and kids, but then also let them know, this is what your 4 years is potentially going to look like if you choose that path.
Right,
So.
great, perfect. And then my second sort of follow-up to that then is, and maybe, you know, right now we have about 70 kids per grade, 60 to 70 in the high school, right? And, you know, I wonder whether if everyone who's taking AP classes should be taking them, but that's a whole nother topic. But my question is, so if what you've said here is that the choices for electives will not necessarily be reduced, but it'll be based on interest, right? With your 10 students, is that going to be a hard and fast rule? Because my concern is if we're talking about Sally, and Sally is counting on, I'm going to take APES my junior year, or I'm going to take a push my whatever year, and then only 7 other kids want it. Are we going to be doing a better job as in terms of guidance and counseling and saying, we are not going to offer APES this year, but we will offer it next year, and you need to be aware of that when you're scheduling, and then stick to it, even if that's only 8 kids who want APES. And I don't know if those are the classes that are small or not, but does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I see what you're saying. Really, when I'm talking about the 10 to 12 kids that we have in classes, actually, I have one elective that has 4. Most of those are the elective classes. So our core content classes tend to be pretty full.
But AP classes, a lot of schools call them core electives. So you're talking like true electives, like drama, and you're not talking core electives, because nobody's required to take an AP. So that,
Right.
So, okay, perfect.
Yes,
That's all you
yes.
have. That's all you have to
Thank
say.
you.
Yep.
Yes,
Thank you.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes, because obviously if I have 6 or 7 kids who want to take an AP class and I'm able to accommodate that in a master schedule, why would I say no to that? However, if I have 10 kids who want to take weightlifting again.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So
Perfect.
prioritizing
Yes.
the
Academics. Wonderful.
over the other.
Thank you. That
Do you
answers
know
my
why our
question.
charter says 27? Was there a change in the law after our charter was done? It was just left there, or was there a reason why we had 27?
It's my understanding that, again, these are from teachers who have been here a while, that the reason why we did 27 is because there was this feeling that if we had more credits, it would be more appealing to the public to come to our school, because that shows that we're getting kids more ready for college somehow, some way, by having more classes. So again, I wasn't here obviously for that, but that's my understanding of why they went with 27, was to just kind of show that we're a more rigorous school, that kids are going to get more academics that way. I don't know if that's true or not.
When you say, so one of the things is, for example, when we talk about these electives in high school, and I joke about the best class I ever took in high school was typing. I mean, because when I look professionally in a digital world, it is the productivity, and it seems, are we going to be more surgical about what we even allow someone to take here as an elective? Because somebody taking basket weaving versus I watch these poor kids trying to operate in a digital world, and they're henpecking around and they literally can't type a paragraph in 5 minutes. I mean, are we going to be more surgical about what goes on that elective list? And it can, not just what people just want to take. I mean,
Right.
I promise you kids not going to want to take typing. I promise you 5 years from now they'll thank you for taking typing.
Yes, so one of the other things we're working on with Master Schedule Committee is looking at our course catalog and figuring out what is in there that we want to continue to offer and what is in there that we want to take away. What are some of the choices that we want to make sure kids have? So, you know, computers, we have a very successful computer class.
And that's not drama.
Public speaking.
I'm sorry?
Public speaking is not drama. So you can't say,
She's saying public speaking.
public speaking should be,
one.
it should be
Oh,
an elective.
so we can certainly consider that. But the arts are super important for a lot of kids. Those classes are full. Kids want to take those classes, and arts in schools is something that, research shows is good for kids. And keeps them more invested in school. It does tend to raise student achievement from the research that I've seen. So taking away the arts, I'm not so sure about. But taking away again, we have weightlifting 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because you've already taken it once, and you have to fill your schedule, then we kind of have to create this other weightlifting. If that's what you want to do, then we have to do weightlifting 2. So that's the kind of scenario that we're trying to take away. We have lots of kids that are interested in computer classes. Those classes are full. I have no reason, except for my AP computer science class, but that's kind of a different topic. So I have no reason to believe why we would take those away, because those are the most requested ones right now as we sit. They like those classes. And they do teach typing during that. Keyboarding, or whatever it's called now.
I think they call it keyboarding now, Rodney. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
Yeah, they start that in middle school. They start that in middle school.
Yeah. Thank you, sorry,
When-
we interrupt.
When are you thinking about implementing this?
For our rising ninth graders.
Okay, so it would be for the 2021 school year?
Correct. The graduating class of 2024.
See what?
The process for changing the charter?
Just send it an amendment.
Yeah, we send it note to the Office of Charter Schools.
Has this been to the academic committee?
It probably would have been if we had it, but Jane and I both had oops that forced us to not be there.
Yeah, and we've discussed it, almost since I got here,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, it's been kind of floating for a little
It
bit.
hasn't been this refined.
Yeah.
Is probably the way to say it.
Would it be the desire of the committee to see it set to for vetting and discussion, or?
I'm fine, yeah. I'm fine with it as presented. Because we've had conversations.
Discussions.
So if you want to vote on it tonight, I'm certainly open to that. I was giving you the opportunity to.
Well,
make
we are
that
missing,
decision.
what is the pleasure of the board? Her original recommendation was that we vote on it. And February and Nicole and Robbie are both, wait till, it was requested in February, or do you feel like we would vote right now?
If everybody else wants to.
If this came to me and it was part of the academic committee report, yes. And if you're saying it's okay with you, then based on your conversations formally, then I take that.
Okay, so I do not hear any opposing view, so I would entertain a motion for, do you want to do the whole, we'll do it piece by piece. So
Yeah,
this
because
would
they're
just be.
different.
Because they're different.
Different topics on the other two.
A motion for the change of graduation requirements.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Okay.
Thank you. The next item that I have for you is that we're requesting an adjustment to the substitute teacher qualifications. Currently, the NCS guidelines require that our substitute teachers are qualified per the guidelines of No Child Left Behind. And this is really limiting the pool of applicants that we're able to have for substitute teachers. Nickleby has, No Child Left Behind, Nickleby has been replaced with Every Student Succeeds Act, and that particular act has eliminated the highly qualified requirement already. When we're not able to fill a teacher absence with a substitute teacher, we end up pulling TAs from classrooms. So clearly when a TA is pulled from a classroom, student learning is impacted because there's one less person in that classroom to help with instruction. So teachers at the last minute are having to adjust their lesson plans because oftentimes we're pulling our TAs on short notice. So it's not something that's planned for ahead of time. JCC does offer a 12-hour effective teacher training for substitute teachers. It's my understanding that a lot of Johnston County substitute teachers have taken that class. We also have a lot of level 2 volunteers that are prohibited from subbing, even though they want to, because of these requirements. And we feel like if we have a volunteer who has shown commitment to our students and the administration approves that they would be certainly capable of substituting in our classrooms, we would like to allow that to happen. It's a win-win for everyone. We would not lower our standard for substitute teachers. They would still go through the screening process. They would still go through the orientation process that we have right now. Our expectations for classroom performance would still be the same. Nothing lowers there. And then increasing our substitute teacher pool obviously would lessen the strain on our system when we need to cover a classroom. So we're asking again, I don't know if this is a voted item. There's been a little bit of debate about that, but we would like to request that we take away the nickel-B highly qualified requirement for substitute teachers.
No, it's a school policy.
I think if it's not board policy, they would just like to have your blessing.
Just for clarity, the JCC 12-hour effective teacher training, do our substitutes go through that now, or are you recommending they should, or are you just saying that's an option?
I'm saying that that's one thing that we could be looking at when we have applicants. So right now, all of our substitute teachers are required to have a 4-year degree, 2-year degree, or 48 credit hours of college credit hours. The JCC 12-hour effective teacher class is really helping them learn how to manage a classroom, what do you need to know to be a substitute teacher. So they don't necessarily have to have that 4- or 2-year degree to take that class. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Do they need to have a degree to take that class? No.
Not from what I can tell on the website.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's
So
not
it's
a
just-
degree, it's a continuing education course that you take.
But we're not requiring that they take that. We're saying that that's an option if in the future we want our substitutes
No, what-
to have more training.
Or if they have
What
that
are
training.
you requiring them to have though, if you take away the No Child Left Behind? What is their requirement?
It would be applying and interviewing just like anybody else.
Like someone with no degree can come in here and be a substitute teacher?
Yes.
After they've gone through the training at JCC.
No,
she just said
she's not
that's not
saying that.
required.
That's not required.
Unless we want to make, I'm fine with requiring that. That's okay with me. I don't have a problem with it. But one of the discussions that we've had too is we have level 2 volunteers who have been here for a long time. I can think of one off the top of my head right now who's fantastic. She can't substitute for us because she doesn't have a highly qualified thing. So I am confident in her ability to be a substitute teacher for us, whether she does this 12-hour effective teacher training or not. She's fantastic in the classroom with the kids, with the teacher present.
And the volunteer.
I mean, I substitute teach when I was in college. You had to have 12 credit hours. I mean, there's got to be something. You can't just literally say somebody off the street can walk in and you think they're nice and great and committed, and you're going to make them the teacher. Is that what you're saying? Kind of.
Well, one of the things that Mr. Betterton and I talked about was that they would have to become a level 2 volunteer and then maybe have 3 months of time with us to see if they could do it, or do they need to do the 12-hour class? I don't know. Really, we just want to take away the nickel-B highly qualified status because our pool is so low.
Well, the pool is so low because we are in a very lucrative job market, and there's not a lot of unemployed people who can come and substitute. And all you have left is literally people who really, either retired or it might not be the people you want to hire anyway. I mean, everyone in education is struggling with the same thing in terms of getting people during the day. They're just not there. They're working. So I'm not sure lowering and taking that all away is going to produce a more qualified person who is stopped by this. It's just going to be the people who just tend to be left.
She's just saying she's seeing some that she can't use.
I think she's talking about stay-at-home moms, a lot of the ones who are volunteering, right? Who are already engaged in the school because they have children here, but they don't meet this requirement.
Right. I don't think it's going to increase that population coming in and applying. I think what it does, it frees up the school administration to see a mom or dad that comes here regularly, often, and works in the classroom.